stuck here, the cops won't bother me. So as you can see, the carburetors have a nice fluid action here. As I raise this, it's perfect. Everything is nice and clean. Let's put it back in the bike. And might as well just clean up the top of the engine as well. So we're going to take this and just figure out a way to get this in there. There we go. I guess if you put it further down, it'll be easier. There we go. It isn't too bad. Now, the clamps here, and as you tighten them, just make sure that they don't move on you. Keep an eye out on the carburetor, just to make sure that it doesn't move or slide out. One tightens the rubber boot to the engine, one tightens the rubber boot to the carburetor. And now let's get the other one, and there's two on each side. Let's make sure that we tighten this boot, and you might want to move this around just to make sure that you're able to slide your screwdriver in such a way that you can remove the carb in the future. Make sure that when you're pushing in this air box, that this part where it meets the carburetor is all the way in towards the little stops of the metal of the carburetor before you tighten everything up. What tends to happen is that oftentimes when I put these the airbags back together with the carbs, if there's any hole in that rubber, it creates a vacuum leak, and then the bike is not going to operate well. So now what you want to do is tighten your airbox clamp, which is, for me, it's here, and it's a little hard to reach, but if I loosen it, I should be able to slide it in a much better way than this. Now, let's tighten the other side. Then it doesn't have to be super tight, but you don't want any vacuum leaks through here. Alright, so now we have two cables here, which are the throttle cables. One is a return, and one is the one that brings it back. And honestly, I always forget which one is which. I guess one way of figuring out which cable it is if you twist this way. That's the one that should raise that throttle mechanism. When you roll it this way, it's the other cable that rolls it back. Throttle, return. So this is the throttle. This is the throttle here. So let's just put it on here. Good thing is you can use your other finger to slide it in there. And now, make sure that this is not, in the correct position here. This is the return, okay. So this is a 10mm wrench. If you pull up this, you should be able to tighten this. You don't want this to come loose as you're riding. But this is how you adjust it, so that's good. And now we're going to adjust the return. You push up on it. Use your finger to tighten as much as you can. Then slide your 10mm wrench that came with your bike. It's one of the better ones because it's nice and small, and tighten it. If there's any binding, you should be able to loosen it a bit, or if there's any sort of play, and I see it's actually a little bit off. There we go. That's it. It was binding and now it's perfect. And this is exactly what we want, just very quick to release, and that's it. The carburetor is in there. Now the next step is hooking up everything to the carb. So one of the things we did, we removed some of the carb, is this T-hose. This goes into the the vent for the gas, and then this T goes into the carburetor here on the top. It's a little difficult to put, but you should be able to slide it in. The air box right here, and then we have this clip that goes into here. You can see this thing has never been apart. Turn on the prime, and now it should just flow onto here. So a lot of times the problems just happen from old gas, because water gets stuck in the gas, and I did notice that the carburetor had some problems that looked like it had water in the carburetor, and I think that's the problem. The gas in this tank is pretty old, and I don't want to take a chance running it through the bike again. I'm going to get some fresh gas. I'm going to let this run out, and I'm just going to go and get... Hi Sophie. There's something to be said about having a bike that doesn't have any carburetors. Just to do that little bit of work, you have to remove so much of the bike. It almost does not make sense, but this is a fabulous bike. I don't think people realize how good it is. But look how small that engine is. When you remove the plastic, you can really tell how small it is. Compare it to the FJR I just bought. At this point, the gas tank is completely empty. I emptied it out. And what I'm going to do is just, before I start bolting everything together, I need to make sure that the carb clean did the job. And I am just going to hook up the cables here. So we're going to take that green line. Yeah, here we go. It goes into the white one. It's kind of hidden. So that's going to give power to the fuel pump. I have my positive here and my negative. I'm going to hook up my battery. And I'm just going to put a little bit of gas here. We're going to slide the air filter element in there, but we're not going to really bolt it because we just don't want to go through all of that trouble just yet. Thick one that comes off from the top of the carburetor goes into the electronic, I think it's like a vacuum of the plastic thing back here. Once you get that, you have your gas hose, which is this big one. And that goes into, actually I'm going to route this a little bit differently. I'm going to put this, the one that goes into the plastic, I'll route it a little bit this way. Fuel line is the thickest one, and that goes into this bottom one. And then you have another line here that comes from the T of the carburetor. And that goes into the small vacuum here of the second hose of the petcock here, and it flows all the way to the bottom of the bike, and it's right here. And let's just put that in there. Now there is some gas already in the gas tank, and we're gonna do our first test of starting the bike. Alright guys, some of the things I might have forgot to mention are that you have to connect the airbox, and this hose right here goes from the crankcase of the engine to the airbox, and I don't think I showed you guys where it was, but there is a hose that goes from there to the very bottom of the airbox that you need to connect. So you have the petcock here, and it's very confusing. There's actually like 4 hoses. There's 2 hoses in the actual petcock. The biggest one goes to the carburetor, that's this one, to the left side of the carburetor, and that's the main fuel hose. And then you have the small hose, which is right here, and it's the T from the top of the carburetor. It goes this way, it goes upward to the engine. Then you have another hose that goes from the carburetor to the fuel pump, the electronic bit of the gas tank, which is back here. And then you have another hose that goes, it's like an exhaust fuel hose that goes from here all the way, and it exits near the rear shock. So keep that in mind. I always get those confused, but now I'm at the point of just putting everything back together on the bike. So before I seal this side of the bike, I want to take this cap off because I want to make sure that the coolant is bled. The oil to, oh, it soaks so much easier. So that is the radiator cap, and I want the bike to warm up in case I need to bleed the system. It's actually full, but since I had to fill the reservoir, I'm just going to let it run for a little bit. And I also want to change the oil on it. It's a little tricky to put, so these tabs should line up. Well guys, the bike is ready. I finished changing the carbs. It is pretty much, it starts, it stops. It needs a new rear tire and probably a new front tire. Needs new oil and filter, but that's small compared to the big item of removing the carb. That was a pain in the ass, and one of the reasons I don't like carb bikes very much anymore. So, and of course it needs a new battery, but I can start it up using my external battery, and I think I am going to see if I can take it for a spin, and we'll see how it rides. Kind of stuck here. The cops won't bother me.